So I just want to talk about this conversation that I had today. Someone came in. They put a vent in the upstairs and downstairs, but they also needed to put in some sort of electricity to have the fan running. I mean, to me, having a fan running 24/7, because they said they have to keep the fans on 24/7, and to me, the idea of having a fan, two fans up and down, running 24 hours a day, actually just seems like a lot of waste of electricity to me. So I'm not actually going to have that on. I'm not going to have those fans on. I don't mind having them open, and I like the idea of having them being used or being able to be used. Like if there's lots of smoke in the kitchen, it might help like clear out the smoke and stuff. So I think it's a good idea to have the ventilation, and it's a good idea to have the fan. But I won't be having the fan on. Of course not. My two fish tanks are about £10 a day because of, I think it's actually the heating that's the most expensive, but there's two motors running on that, and they're tiny little motors, but you notice the difference when the motor stops running. There's about a 10p difference, and therefore these repellers are actually bigger, so I think there must be like 20p a day to run or something, so I'm not going to be having that on. I was speaking to that. I thought it would be an idea just to talk to this guy about like what he thought was happening with the housing market, how he was able to get onto it. And yeah, he just thought it was absolutely impossible to get onto the housing market. None of his friends have got onto the housing market. They're basically just living hand and mouth. And on one hand, he didn't like it, and he doesn't like not being able to buy a property, but on the other hand it's kind of just like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. We have to just basically abide by whatever the government is offering. If they're offering jobs, building jobs obviously is a good line for him. So he was fitting in doing work, I guess, being trained up to be an electrician. He looked about 20 or something. I don't know, he might have been 23. He looked like a young guy, and yeah, he was saying that no one he knows can save up to buy a deposit, save up enough money to get a deposit. Now, right now, the houses, this one's about 190, so he will probably be facing the similar kind of, I was trying to think into his mind like what he's going through, but he was probably thinking a similar kind of line to what I was thinking when I left uni, although house prices in London, I might have been able to buy a studio flat for 190, but again, I was not wanting to spend £190,000. I didn't have the money. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't even get a deposit. It took me 3 years of being on the dole to try and just give up and say, right, I'm going to do massage, work from home. My parents had a shitty, cluttered flat, and it was kind of very embarrassing to invite people into this home. I put a curtain across the living room, and I worked from that. I mean, it was embarrassing doing that because it was like almost telling everyone, yes, I'm poor, yes, I have no money, yes, I'm living with my parents, yes, I'm 23, 24, 25, 26, so I was doing that, but I had to do that because that was the only way I could get off the dole. I jobs didn't seem real to me. I had three, and there's one interview that was like stacking in the back, and I didn't get that job, and I didn't want that job, but there was, if the only jobs you can seem to get any interest in are just jobs you don't even want, this is just incredibly depressing. And yeah, the idea of getting out a mortgage, based on my massage job, so I have to commit myself to doing this job for the next 10 years just to pay off a mortgage. I didn't think the house market was going up, and maybe he's in the same situation. He's noticing that house prices are around 190, maybe even 200, maybe even the 230. But if in 10 years time I'm wrong about this rapture happening, and if in 10 years time all the houses that are 250 are actually a million, I'm realizing that I have a huge amount of anger because of living in London, knowing that house prices are 250, and then just having to spend year after year after year watching the house market go up, being forced to come to Birmingham. And okay, I felt a bit better, and I kind of calmed down at that point because at least I owned something. But he's not feeling the anger that I'm feeling because he hasn't gone through years and years of feeling like a slave, feeling like the government don't care, feeling like the government don't give a shit that you are going to have to do a job that you don't actually want to do, and most people are going to find that this is what happens. But yeah, he's angry. Yeah, he wants to get onto the property market, but he's still on the sort of level of, I haven't actually gone through that much yet. And I brought up the subject of Tommy Robinson. I don't even know how that subject came in, but yeah, I talked about, I can't remember how it came in, but I talked about Tommy Robinson, and I just kind of got his opinion on Tommy Robinson. I think it's Islam. I was talking about Islam and saying that I really can't remember, I've blanked out the whole conversation, but I was trying to get an idea of what he thought about communism, the country becoming more communistic, and perhaps the rise of Islam being one of the reasons why it's coming in, because technically Islam is a kind of a communist state. You know, you have the people at the top who are declaring themselves as being followers of Allah, and then you have the people at the bottom who are all kind of like living under this sort of scheme where the rich have everything and the poor just are slaves to the rich. You know, that is kind of a bad system, and but it's a terrible system, because the poor are enslaved in a negative way. And you know, I can't remember what I said, but he said that that there's nothing wrong with Islam, and then I asked him, you know, what do you think of Tommy Robinson, and he was just like, oh no, I don't like the guy, he's too extreme for me, he's a racist. And I was thinking, why do you think he's a racist? And because of all the chants that they were doing, you know, there's a lot of racist chants in there. And I was like, well, I was at that event, and they were saying, Allah, Allah, who the fuck is Allah? I mean, how is that racist? And then it was like, oh, it's because it's against their religion, and what is this? Their religion isn't about a race. And I was kind of saying that, you know, if England became an Islamic country, I'm going to have to be forced to dress like a black Teletubby, and therefore I don't want that to happen, and therefore I am against the religion. Yes, and you know, because he was saying that it's I have, when then he said he's got friends that are Muslim, and that, you know, he doesn't see a problem with Islam. I was like, well, yeah, because you're a man. if England becomes an Islamic country, you're not going to be the ones going to be losing your rights. I am, so I have more right to be over you know, Islam. And he was just, you know, and I'm saying all the problems of extremism that Islam brings, and he was just like, oh no, there's extremism in Christianity and in Islam. And I just said, Jesus wasn't a murderer. Jesus didn't commit horrible crimes. Muhammad does. And so if you've got Muhammad as your sort of leader or influence or example of a perfect human being, you know, you're going to bring about way more problems than Jesus, because Jesus didn't promote all that stuff. And I think at that point he looked like he'd lost the screw or something, and he wanted to walk out. So I knew he didn't want to have this conversation. But, you know, on one hand, I was kind of first of all getting a sense of like, you know, he's struggling to get on the market, and he's not that angry because he hasn't gone through years of slavery. You know, if he knew, say if he'd gone through the same thing that I had gone through, you know, saying, oh, the housing market's too expensive, I can't get a mortgage, the housing market, I can't afford £200,000 for a flat. I mean, you're probably actually in Birmingham, you'll get a whole house for 200,000. But he's not at the stage where he wants to take out a gigantic mortgage and make this massive commitment. Likewise, I wasn't when I came out of uni. I didn't want to make a 20-year commitment to become a slave, and spend, you know, the next every month for the next 10 years paying off £1,000 just to pay off this high mortgage. You know, I didn't want to do that because I don't want to be a slave, and likewise he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to be a slave. But if, however, he went through the same experience that I've gone through, which is just year after year watching the market get higher and higher, because the people who are owning loans are just, you know, taking out all this rent money or taking out the mortgage money, mortgage repayments, and they're just getting richer and richer, hence they're buying up more properties and they're setting the market. You know, if he went through 10 years of that, he would be feeling the anger that I'm feeling. But right now he's not feeling the anger, because right now he just assumes that things are going to get better, and that this market is, that they're going to help him. They're going to help stop the market from rising up. The market's not going to rise up. Now, I don't believe the market is going to continue rising, because I believe that I'm going to try and stop the market from rising up anymore. But at the same time, people are ignoring me. You've been ignoring me for 12 years, so how do I know you're not to ignore me for the rest of my life? And maybe the market is going to double. You know, my sister is convinced that the house market is going to double, and then that guy in the jacuzzi also thought that his £230,000 house was going to be worth $500,000 or $400,000, you know, in another 10 years' time. So they've all got this deception that the same thing that happened in London is going to happen here. But that's not a good thing, because what happened in London actually pissed me off, because I was watching the house market rise more and more, thinking that I can't get on, I'm not going to get on, and then just being more and more concerned that I'm not going to be able to pay the rent, and then having to live in a tiny studio flat for a whole year. And then I moved to a one bedroom. I had a client who had a flat who gave me a really good rent, but that was a smelly. I couldn't even go in the bedroom because it was so it smelt of rot and dampness. And so, you know, if I became ill because of that, I wouldn't be surprised. There was one or two clients that I said we could go into the bedroom, and they took one smell of the bedroom. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going in there. So that's how fucking bad that flat was. It was a really expensive flat, and there was lots of marble everywhere, but it looked like the dogs had just been pissing all over it because there was lots of sort of marks on the on some of the areas of the corners of it. But I put a big carpet, a rug down. It was okay, but if people are going to go through the same thing that I've gone through in London, and they're going to start going through in Birmingham, you're just going to rise up anger, because these people, they think it's not going to rise, and if it does keep rising, that they're just going to be full of anger, and you know, and then it's like, on one hand, I don't like the fact that it's happening, but on the other hand, this guy wasn't able to recognize that Christianity and Islam are not the same thing, and he thought that that the march in London was all about racism. What's I didn't hear any racist remarks saying who the fuck is Allah. That's not racist. That's just saying that we don't know who this God is, and we don't want this God coming to our land. Why? Because the Middle East is full of shit and horrible people, and if bringing Allah to this land is going to make England an Islamic country, so that I have to dress up like a Teletubby, and people have to sort of wear nightgowns when they go to church, and be bow down to church 5 times a day, just so that they can give worship to something that doesn't speak or talk back or doesn't even make sense, because it's so oppressive towards women, and you know, he couldn't feel the anger. I think he could feel the anger, that's why he kind of left, but I feel like he wasn't thinking about women, and the fact that Islam is incredibly oppressive over women, and therefore I feel like, even though I felt sorry that he's in sort of, he can't get on the housing market, and he's working, and he's going to be working really hard, and if the same thing that happened in London is going to happen in Birmingham, you know, he's going to find that the housing market goes up. How much he makes each year, he's going to find that the housing market goes up and up and up, and he's going to find himself just getting more and more and more angry, and maybe then in 10 years time he will actually look back on what has happened to Tommy Robinson, and he'll actually be like, you know what, I understand this anger, I know this anger is a problem, and Islam is a type of communist regime, and I know China is a communist regime. I think there's a difference though, because China has freedoms for women. China has equality between men and women, and Islam doesn't. So it's communism as in what's going on in the Islamic countries. You know, this is actually incredibly sick, because it treats women like shit, and it takes all their rights away, takes their freedoms away. So it's incredibly revolting towards women, in my view, and I don't like their clothes. But you know, communism in China is better, but at the same time, I do see them as being a bit like robots, and you know, people just following rules and following laws, even if they don't make sense. You know, that there are some people that you know are told, do this, and they're so scared of losing their salary, losing their job, that they're just going to do this. Doing this doesn't make any sense, but I have to do my job, and I have to make sure that people don't do this. Like me being on my phone, if I want to make a ticket, but buy a ticket for an Everyman Cinema, I need to get signal, and there's only one place in the swimming pool area where I can get signal to buy this ticket, even though it's not by the swimming pool and it's kind of just next to it. You know, that lady that keeps coming by and telling me off, you know, she's following orders, she's following laws, the laws are or the rules are of this pool is that I'm not allowed to bring the phone near the swimming pool in case it breaks and falls in, and you have to empty the swimming pool to get the glass out, which is very expensive because it's a really giant swimming pool. But you know, she's following orders, even though I'm not actually by the swimming pool. I'm kind of around the corner, and I need to stand here because there's no signal if I move 1 meter that way, and because I need to book it before. You need to book it before the adverts start, otherwise you can't book it. So you know, I have to book it whilst in that specific area, and I don't know, trying to convince her that this is, it's just hard. You know, it's just like she's got the rules that are played in there, and even if some of the rules don't make any sense, you know, they'll just play by the rules because they're acting like robots. And I think communism builds robotic mindsets in people because they're too scared to lose their job. They're too scared that they can't pay off the rent. They're too scared to disobey the government that they just stop thinking and they become more like sheep. And I don't like this. You know, I like capitalism because you get people at different levels according to you know how intelligent they are. Okay, capitalism is falling apart in England right now because people are getting rich through just owning a property, which is not how you should not just get rich by owning a property and having a nice life in that property. You know, people should be encouraged to form businesses because this causes skills, not just buy properties and rent them out. That there's no skill in that. And if the banks are just taking up gigantic loans, and I don't know, maybe they're all living in Hawaii or something. Mark Zuckerberg was supposed to have a big compound in Hawaii, but wherever these billionaires who own all the bank's money, and they're just taking huge amounts. It might even just be 1%. 1% is not very much, but at the same time, if you've got £1 billion and you're making 1% every year, you're making money from doing absolutely nothing, and the banks are making 5% each year. I guess they have to try and loan out people, give the loans to people that can enslave people. They're basically giving money to enslavers, people who are enslaving people. And I don't know what's happened with George, but I'm wondering if the reason why he's avoided Sophie is because he's got a bunch of slave owners that have given him a huge amount of money, and now he feels a huge amount of loyalty to them, but has to obey them because of all this money that he's been given or something. I'm wondering if that's a possibility. And I don't know, but I know Sophie's trying to get access to her older son for the first time in 5 years, and I don't know how it's going to go. But I know that there is a bunch of people above who seem to be controlling my whole life, but they're not controlling. They're preventing me from getting a job. They're preventing me from getting on TV. They're preventing the news people from talking about me. But I don't know why. I mean, is it just shutting me up because they don't want me to destroy their amazement of just having lots of money and just buying up all these houses whilst pretending that the houses are all full? Yeah, they're all full. Yeah, okay, we own like 80% of them, but yeah, they're all full. We need to buy more. I really hate this subject, and I'm going. It's annoying because on one hand I felt sorry for him because he would never get on the housing market at the rate we're going. But on the other hand, he didn't seem to see any problem with Islam. He's got a lot of friends that are Muslim. He saw Tommy Robinson as being a racist, even though there's no evidence that he's a racist. And yeah, I think he would even see me as being a racist for saying that those women in black veils look like black Teletubbies. Is that a race? No, that's not a race, because you could be black or white or Asian, but you still look like a black Teletubby, regardless to what colour your skin is. Race is a colour of your skin. And a garment is different. That is something you choose to wear because of you've been brainwashed into thinking that looking ugly is pretty. That's what it is. And if you think that's racist, then I just think you're stupid, and I don't care if you're enslaved by people, because I think you're an idiot and you need to stop thinking like a robot. But communism forms robots. Why? Because people are so desperate to just conform with whatever the government agrees with, or whatever the narrative is being spun. This is why the media is probably very easy to control. They're so happy that they've got a job in the media. I couldn't get a job in a media, but if you did get into a job in the media, they've probably just been brainwashed into thinking, wow, I have to just look at what everyone else is posting and then go along with it. And if the government is going to sue me for doing certain things, then I'm going to make sure that I don't do certain things, even if what I'm actually saying is just a bunch of bullshit. Even if me making a panorama video about how we just need to make more houses, even though the reality is we need to make more. If the government does just build more houses, it's only going to give them to the bankers so that they can continue enslaving people whilst pretending to help people, when really they're just getting more power because they're actually getting more rich, because they can gain more profit off all these properties that they're renting out. But of course, it's not them who own it. They'll get some other people in there to pretend that they own it, when really they only own a quarter or something. And when the house starts falling apart, or the value starts being lost, if the value starts being lost, if a tenant comes in there and doesn't pay the rent, okay, they can get insurance claims and stuff, but then they have to pay a fortune for the insurance claims. So how much are they actually making? Doesn't matter. The banks get their loan money either way, so the banks don't care, and I hate the whole system.